Rowan.
Hi.
Hi. Good morning. I want you to do a little visioning experiment with me. Okay, so close your eyes. Mm-hmm. Imagine you're sitting there sipping a tasty brew. Maybe you have to open your eyes because you're editing a new viral clip that you're doing and the phone rings. Okay, it's an international number. So a little bit of warning signs, but you ignore the telemarketer risk and you answer it. It's a fan or maybe an investor, and they want you to take Golden Brown, your coffee brand, to Portugal. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
I'm thinking every time I hear something like that, I'm thinking tax-deductible research trip. Get me over to Portugal. I'm thinking some Portuguese tarts, maybe some fancy canned fish. Is that what we're looking at?
Okay, good ideas, good thoughts. But what about the coffee side of thing? What about taking Golden Brown there?
Oh, man. God, I have no idea. I have no idea what's happening in Portuguese coffee culture. So I guess I'd need to look at that and figure out what people actually want over there. Is there a home espresso market that's kind of popping off? I'd have to think about, how am I going to sell coffee there? Am I shipping it over? Am I setting up a roastery there? Am I contract roasting it through someone? Do I need to hire staff? Is there going to be a Golden Brown? Maybe a TikTok of Golden Brown Portugal to bring a little bit of that Golden Brown sizzle.
I can see you on the beach, some Golden Brown swimwear, some beautiful things there. That'll sell the sizzle. So you're right. Like, obviously so much to think about. It'd be so much to unpack to try and take your business to a whole new area. And I've had a bit of experience kind of trying to do this and manage not just the logistical stuff, but that cultural connection, right? You're trying to manage a team at a whole remote place. But I think it's some pretty exciting stuff there.
It sounds very exciting. I'd love to do it, but I feel like the reason you're bringing that up is because we have a guest today who's done exactly that and moved their built their business as well in Japan, which is super exciting. So we're going to talk all things business development. We're going to talk coffee consumer preferences and company culture. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pod. I'm Rowan Cook.
And I'm Ben Bicknell.
And it's just coffee. In this show, we're bringing you all the inside scoops, tips and tricks, and inspiring guests to help us tackle the future of coffee. Now, today is the force behind one of the Southern Hemisphere's biggest and most beloved coffee brands. He's at the reins of Coffee Supreme, starting it in New Zealand and growing it into Australia and now Japan. In today's episode, we're going to talk about building culture through coffee, the challenges of scaling without selling out, and why a great cup always starts with connection. And welcome to our guest, Andrew Lowe.
Woo! Yoo-hoo!
Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a quick word from one of our sponsors, Apex Lab. Elevate your coffee experience with Apex Lab Mineral Concentrates. Apex Lab's precision-engineered formulas, including tonic, jam, and lilac, are designed to enhance the coffee's natural flavors. Not going to change it, it's just going to enhance it. It's going to bring out the vibrant acidity, the rich sweetness, or if you use lilac, it might bring out those delicate floral notes that you've been looking for. Trusted by world-class cafes and even barista champions, Apex Lab helps you unlock your coffee's full potential. Discover more at apexlab.com. Wait, where was that again, Sonam?
The internet.
Oh, okay. Thought I was going to say the website. Thanks. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsors at Eco Barista. The reason I sound like this is because they got massages at our stand at Mice, and so I'm getting a massage while recording this message for you. They're the best sponsor of the pod that we could have had. They have the best eco products. This probably sounds really pornographic, but it's not. I'm just getting a massage. They have the best eco-friendly coffee products. They got coffee bags that you can design yourself. They got cups. They got iced coffee cups. They got everything you need. So make sure to support them because they support us. Head to ecobarista.com.au and get 15% off your first purchase when you sign up. Oh, mama, that's good.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here. And I just want to reframe that for you, Ron. The illustrious history of Coffee Supreme is something we're very proud of. Let's acknowledge I didn't start the business in 1993. I am standing on the shoulders of giants and hope not to drop the baton in this current chapter, but excited to take your listeners through our great history and the plans for the future.
Absolutely. And I've got to set a little context here. Before we started the pod, we were chatting with Andrew and he was like, wait, I'm not wearing a Coffee Supreme shirt. Should I throw one on? We said yes. The man comes back. He only had a medium in stock. And let me tell you, this is a sizzle to watch the YouTube because this bloke is ripped and looks fantastic.
It's now that no one's listening, it's probably a ladies' medium. But I've just put on what I could find. Brand over function. The brand team is going to give me a fair bit of feedback about this. And for that, Matt, I apologize.
No, that's how you sell the brand. I love it. Now, Coffee Supreme is very well known across Australia and New Zealand, but for our listeners that might not be familiar with it, could you give us a little bit of a rundown on Coffee Supreme and also a little bit of a rundown on yourself?
Love to. So let's start with Coffee Supreme, way more interesting anyway. So this was a brand founded in 1993, if you can hark yourself back that far into the dark ages, in Wellington, New Zealand, by Chris Dillon and Maggie Wells. Now, it started as a cafe, and Chris and Maggie started something called Red's Cafe, and they had signed on to a supply of Bellaroma coffee. A couple of months into this cafe, which has started to do things differently to how cafes traditionally existed, life before the cafe culture and coffee scene, Bellaroma went into liquidation. So Chris, being the creative visionary that he is, went, well, I could choose another roaster, or I'll just buy this one out of liquidation. So he took Bellaroma on. Now, Chris came with a background in film and studio, so zero experience in coffee, but went, how can it be? And
Classic.
kind of the rest is history. So he took over the cafe, and that was kind of fate. And this is fate talking about an opportunity to move from a cafe to roasting. And fate's pursuit of better, a follow your heart approach is kind of what defines Coffee Supreme's next 30 years. As curious staff with itchy feet kind of helped their way expand into Australia, then into Japan. And this was kind of an organic growth model based on good people wanting to share good coffee with the world. So that's kind of how it worked. I would say Chris, Maggie, and Coffee Supreme are heralded as one of the founders of the specialty coffee movement. For your listeners' benefit, coffee was bought only really through importers for many, many years. But Chris and Maggie were some of the first to go to origin, to meet a farmer, to understand where the coffee came from. And that venturing was really on a mission to buy better, but to buy fairer, which was a new phrase. This is life before the fair trade movement, life before any worker conditions. And so that was something that they, at an ethics level, always believed in. Fast forward to today, we've got 5 roasteries in 3 countries. We support over 1,000 wholesale cafes. So we are, by our nature, a core wholesaling business with wonderful wholesale partners. We supply 400 New Zealand supermarkets and thousands of homes via our online website. So what probably a lot's changed, but what hasn't changed in 32 years is our purpose. And we define our purpose at Coffee Supreme to enhance people's lives through greater connection, creativity, and collaboration. And our belief is that only a great cup of coffee can do that and no other beverage. So we're sticking to it. So that's the Coffee Supreme story. Now, just a little bit about me. If no one's listening, I can quite safely disclose that I am an accountant by trade and qualification, but that's a long time in my distant past. I learned at some time I liked numbers. I didn't like being left in the numbers room. I liked getting out there in the world. And so I've always been in food and beverage manufacturing. And so I started in the big corporates, Unilever and Cerebos Foods, which was a Suntory company. I spent my life working in some of their factories. One of my little jobs was actually working in the Rosella tomato factories. So we would make tomato sauce and continental soup. And so really selling to supermarkets. My step into coffee began in 2009 when I jumped over and was the CEO of Toby's Estate Coffee. So again, one of the founders of the Sydney specialty coffee movement, founded by Toby Smith in 97. He, as a pioneer, built that business up, and then I came in to help run that from 2009 to 2014. And this is just when coffee was taking off. So there wasn't a lot of specialty cafes. We were doing about 4 tonne a week at Toby's at that time, had about 100 wholesale accounts. In 4 years, we moved from Sydney. We launched in Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth. We launched in Singapore, Indonesia. We launched in Brooklyn, and we were roasting over 20 tonne a week by the time we're done with about 1,000 customers. And so that journey was amazing. And that taught me a huge amount about how to scale coffee companies, in fact, any company, at pace and all of the growing pains that came with it. Then I went, well, that was hard and I'm getting through the other side. Why don't I do something even harder? And I co-founded with a good buddy of mine, Adam Theobald, Automentum, which is the hospitality industry's largest B2B ordering and payment platform. So we help about 45,000 bars, restaurants and cafes place their coffee, their bread, their milk, their juice, their produce orders with about 1,000 suppliers on a daily basis. That platform's been going for over 10 years now, and we've transacted 6 billion on that platform since it started. So we're really proud of that. I'm still on the board of that business. Adam's running it. And then I kind of stepped back and went, you know what? I'm going back to my passion in food and beverage, and I started consulting. So I went back into consulting food distribution companies, the NAFTA Food Service Group, a couple of coffee roasters on the unit economics and how to scale wholesale companies, a few drinks companies. Did that, and then landed at Coffee Supreme. Now, I got here by happenstance. I got one of those calls as an industry expert by Pioneer Capital, who were looking to actually acquire Coffee Supreme from the founders. And they said, could you help us buy the business and understand the numbers? I said, no problem. They said, actually, you didn't do a bad job of that. Could you join the board with us? So I went, that sounds like fun. I love this brand. I've always revered it from a distance. And then the opportunity popped up a year later, and that was late 22. And so then the opportunity popped up in 2023 when the then CEO moved on to a different opportunity, that I took over the reins. And so the rest, as they say, is history. And that's a little bit about the brand, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, it really sounds like you haven't done much, and it sounds like we won't have much to talk about on this podcast.
In a quiet couple of decades there, Andrew.
That is amazing. What a resume.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you just painted that picture of like your personal journey. You've been in quite a few quite senior leadership positions throughout the hospitality and coffee industry. What have you noticed that's changed over that time? Are there things that really jump out for you?
Oh, absolutely, Ben. So let's talk about environment and let's talk about styles. And so environment, my career has gone from corporate to mid-cap to startup back to scale up. I'm more comfortable in that agile, high-paced environment than I am in big, stuffy boardrooms, as much as I enjoyed the trappings of that, because it does link to a certain style. So leadership style, from when I joined the workforce in the late 90s, just when Liam was being born, in the late 90s, was formal, structured, top-down, hierarchical, and scripted communication. And this was life before laptops and before smartphones. So you actually just went to work, did stuff, went home. And then now it's moved to less formal, more fluid, always on, engaging and informal communication. And that style's natural to me. And I think I'm really excited about the change of the shift from leaders being what they're supposed to be in a book to authentic. And that authentic leadership style is really drifting through in business, where you can bring your whole self to work. You can share how you feel. You can be vulnerable. I'm probably known as an oversharer, so that could get me in trouble on this podcast. You can be challenged in public around decisions made, and the collective good feels respected and rewarded. And I really enjoy that. And so I do think that's what's changed in leadership. That's what's changed in letting everyone have a voice, and the deconstruction of some of that hierarchy, I think, is creating more value than destroying it.
Okay, so Andrew, coffee industry in the 90s to 2025, what's the biggest things that you've seen change?
Overall, it's pace of change. So coffee was regular, staid, run and controlled by the Italians. Everything was imported, mostly in brick packs. I don't know if most of you came in your coffee journey like I did to a brick pack of Lavazza or Illy or Vittoria that was in the Sunday plunger, and you'd pull a special cup out for the Sunday family brunch, and you'd make the brew, and it was usually stale rubbish, but you were told from a young age it's supposed to be nice, so you drank it. And cafe culture out of home didn't really exist. So it kind of kicked. And when we're at Toby's, we started to see that shift. We started to see the modern players, the Campos, the Single Over Toby's, the San Ali's, the Seven Seeds, all those guys in Sydney, Melbourne really start to hit their straps and get out there and change the way and the expectation of what coffee is. But that led to an evolution of cafes. So when I began in about 2009, we'd say our addressable market was about 5,000 cafes around the country. Today, 27,000, and that doesn't include all the venues like petrol stations and corporates and quick service restaurants that sell coffee. So there is so much choice now. And there are so many venues to buy coffee, which has its strengths and weaknesses, which I'll talk about. A little stat for your listeners, which blew my mind. McCafe was founded in Australia, and so we want to talk specialty coffee, but we also want to talk coffee in general. And it's heralded as one of the global success stories. McCafe now sells, so coffee at McDonald's in this country sells $1 billion a year, and that's 1 in 4 cups consumed in the country are sold through McDonald's. So you've just got to put a pause on that and go, that's changed the economic and the coffee landscape. And they were doing group handle machines through drive-thrus, and it was pretty revolutionary at the time. But what it did is it meant that all of us as specialty roasters just had to up our game. So we had to create amazing stuff in the cup. So the second thing that's changed, quality in the cup. The standards, the Q grading, the discipline, the structures, the testing, the roasting science, the barista comps, all of those things meant we just leveled up constantly and improved the cup quality. And people started to notice. And so, again, if you step back 20 years and you went to a cafe, it was a little like playing roulette. Was it going to be good? Was it going to be crap? It was going to be okay. And the gap between great and poor was significant. Today, that gap's pretty small. It's hard to get a bad coffee. You do from time to time, but in Australia and in New Zealand generally, you're talking a 7 out of 10 as a floor price. And that's a pretty good place for a consumer to be, but that creates a lot of challenge for business owners to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, I had a thought back in, I think 2009 is kind of when I started my barista journey and kind of got into specialty then, which there wasn't as much around it. And I used to have a rule or a saying where I'd be like, if the cafe has a rosetta on the coffee or a bit of latte art, they're going to be busy. Because there was kind of this sign of like, if that was where you were offering good quality, good sign, like it would be packed. Now, every single place has, everyone can do latte art. Everyone is pulling good shots. Even hairdressers now are serving up coffee and they've got like, barista training behind there doing that. So I completely agree that like standard is just everywhere now. And for the industry, that's hard to compete with, or we need to find different ways to look at it to succeed.
I think it's really interesting as well what you mentioned about McCafe, because I feel like it's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing of, we had this great kind of independent coffee culture that really rose. You saw the success of it boom in cafes, a lot of interest from consumers. Big groups like McCafe kind of came on board, adapted to a lot of those kind of systems and beverage production. And then in turn, that fed back in and forced, as you say, that further innovation from the independent kind of scene to go, well, that's the level that the mass is accessing now. We need to really step up. So it's a pretty exciting kind of environment in the Australian and kind of New Zealand kind of space. And so we talk there, the changes, in a really great arc there of the coffee industry. What about if we narrow down and focus on the cup? So again, coffee from the 90s, coffee in the cup in the 90s to what it is in 2025. What do you see has changed? How do you think consumers are looking at it?
Yeah, look, so a couple of obvious trends and then probably a couple of subtle trends if I think about it. The obvious one is we all came into it with the dry cappuccino, extra foam, extra chocolate. If you didn't walk away from the experience with something on your nose and eyebrows, it wasn't high enough. And that's kind of that special moment where you got the spoon. That died pretty quickly. The flat white took over and that's kind of reset coffee standard. So I think drink construction by nature changed. Brew ratios changed. So it all led through machines. And so I think, Rowan, your other point outside of Rosetta in 2009, what you started to see change was certain machines on bench. It was about when La Marzocco was entering the market in earnest back then under all press sponsorship, but then independently a few years later. And my market quality was if a La Marzocco was on the bench, then coffee was going to be good because that cafe or that roaster had invested in the best. And I think that is the universal standard today, and it remains. And so I think the machines changed. The grinders had changed. We went from pre-ground, little dosing clicker grinders to automatic. And I admit, I've been around a while. I can't keep pace with the grinder technology. There's grind by weight, grind by time, different dose, different dial, different adjustments, different tamping devices. They all absolutely contribute to quality, but there's a lot going on there.
And now we've even got a couple models up here. Now even moving into grind by sync, where the grinder's connected to the coffee machine, and they communicate and adjust the grind size without the barista even touching it.
Yeah, I think that tech, and we'll likely talk about that a bit later, but the role of technology in drink construction, you would underestimate at your peril, is my comment at this point in time. But so I think that's certainly changed. The next thing that's changed is everyone had cow's milk, and then everyone went, I think we're overweight, so we went skim milk. And then everyone went from skim milk to plant milk. And so when I started, we're running our cafes, Bonsall was about the only thing that was offered as a non-dairy alternative. We would sell one case, which is 6 litres a day in a very busy cafe. That's now 8 cases to 9. It was probably 5% of sales. Plant milk in certain suburbs and demographics split across soy, oat, almond, sometimes coconut, would be up to 50% of cups. And so people are really shifting away from dairy to plant milk. And so that's changed how we brew and roast coffee, because it's a different product to work with. And so we think that's changed. Size has gone from big to small. Well, we tend to focus on quality in the cup, not getting 20 ounces of a milkshake. So all those things probably compound, and we are where we are today.
Not that it really adds too much to that, but an interesting fact on the dairy side of things, I feel like now there's even a revolution going back to dairy, with people looking at the different like oils and stuff inside these plant-based milks, and now people are starting to see that benefit. So there's even a shift there. It's such a funny like full circle of how we were doing it. I was chatting with the Starbucks team the other day who we had on the podcast, and they were saying that I think 75% of the milk drinks are dairy.
Yeah.
And the alternative one's interesting because it sits at 25, but then other alternative milks come in that kind of eat away at the within its own sales market. Like, you know, oat milk comes in and just kind of eats away at soy or almond. But I also think generations are defined by their alt milk. Like the millennials are the bonsoyers, the soy, and it's that distinctive taste that they then get accustomed to. And it's hard to move away from once you become accustomed to a specific alt milk taste.
Yeah. And I think it's that narrative, kind of like what you're saying, Andrew, that's going in around like the culture, you know, and in the consumer culture in general about, you know, health benefits and kind of, you know, the story of where these products come from and kind of what's of interest to them. And the incredible positioning that's happening now with some of the alt milks is fascinating in how they're trying to differentiate and tell, you know, build up some identity and some emotion around some of these different brands is pretty fascinating.
I think so. I mean, they're a brand in their own right. And what's interesting is it was a battle in the coffee industry. Consumers would come into a cafe and they were more attached to the brand of plant milk that they wanted in their drink than they were to the brand of coffee. And so we had to go, hold on, you're muscling up in our game here. This is our space. You're playing a support role. You're not the lead. Get back in your box, literally. And so we've had to work hard as a coffee industry to go, hey, how does this work? And I do think that's shifting, Ben. A lot of the older generations as they've gone through plant milk are going, some brands, and I won't speak to who, have rapeseed oil and a whole lot of other things in them. They're really not great products, and they need it to be textured at heat and the emulsification. But people are going back to natural, and certainly, as I know the team on Starbucks would absolutely tell you, the Gen Zers, they just want functional, flavoured, Instagrammable drinks, and they're not as attached to the ingredients at this point in their life stage. They just want it to look, feel, and taste great, and they won't compromise on that to health at this stage. But I think the next decade for them might change.
I think the really interesting part is that you've started to get this segmentation of that space and kind of more development in that area, where now you've got, you know, back again in the 90s and early 2000s, you had very limited options for anyone who didn't want to drink kind of cow's milk. Now you've got this huge swathe, some that are much more focused around, as you say, just a functional kind of product that can texture well and present really well, some that are very health focused, some that are very much around flavor. And I mean, for me personally, that's the thing that excites me, right, is that now there are alternative kind of milks that can really pair with a specialty coffee in a quality way. Yeah, some interesting movements there. So, Andrew, just zooming back into your leadership experience, you've kind of been at the helm of two pretty iconic coffee businesses, and then in amongst the hospitality and beverage business for a long time. What would you say some of the most important skills or perspectives are for someone who's in those leadership positions? Like, what's the things that, if someone was either moving into that space or kind of was considering that, what do you think that they should kind of be looking at?
Here's the challenge, and here's how I think about it. The challenge is that in the coffee industry, we have to provide consistency to the customer through the machine and in the cup for a product that's seasonal, ever-changing commodity. And that's really difficult. And so what padding do we put around that to deliver that brand promise? People is always, my answer is always people first. So talented people who blend, roast, and train customers. You've got to put great people around that supply chain. Education sets you free, consistency and process. Finding a delicate balance between the art and science of coffee roasting and brewing is important. This is romantic. A lot of it is sensory, but a lot of it is functional and structural. And so introducing the artisan principles of knowing what to do, but also always keeping yourself modern in terms of what are the new scientific developments, how can we level up our game in some of our factories, just how we focus on moisture, colour, roast consistency, profiling on the machine and brew testing super matters. The next thing in this coffee game, it's expensive. And so a savvy CFO or a finance guy really helps because cash flow is tough. And it's tough for a business that uses a lot of direct trade or relationship coffee because, reminding your listeners, harvests don't happen every week. You don't go to the pantry and buy green beans. You go to the season. So the teams fly over in the next 4 weeks to Brazil. August is where you're trying samples. The harvest is kind of August, September, shipments later in the year. We then buy containers, and a container of coffee is worth about $200,000 per container. And we have to pay for that. Then 12 weeks later, it arrives. Then we put it in our warehouse. Then we have to use it over a couple of months so we don't run out. And so basically, that 200 grand's gone for 6 months. Then we sell it to a cafe and hopefully get our money back. And so for us, cash is super tough. And that's before we give our wonderful wholesale partners really great equipment. And that's super expensive too. So getting a cash right, pretty hard. But ultimately, I think success in coffee is taking a longer term view. Commodity prices go up and down. You've got to build your brand consistently. You've got to focus on your wholesale customers' profitability over time. And that's working with your cafe partners through thick and thin to say, how can we continue to grow together? Being obsessed about their comp store sales, what we can do to improve their business. Because if you improve theirs, they improve yours. And so we spent a lot of time focused on that. That, in the famous words of Chris Dillon, our founder, this game can never be clocked. So we will never stop having to constantly improve that process. And that's what's kept us busy for 32 years.
Quick question on for our international listeners. I don't know if anywhere else does this. I'm completely oblivious to it. But the fact of being the coffee roaster and also providing the machines and the grinders and everything to the cafes, first of all, what do we think of that model? And secondly, does everywhere do this? Are we the only place in the world that does this? Like, do you have more context on that, Andrew?
Yeah, so we are uniquely special in that we would be the largest supplier of free on-loan equipment to cafe partners in the world. And so I don't think I say that with pride because it's an expensive business model. It did start with some of the traditional players. And the reality is, let's step back to that economics of the industry. When there's 5,000 or 6,000 cafes, like an average cafe in Sydney or Melbourne CBD, they were doing 30 to 40 kilos a week. It was good money, and machines cost $6,000 to $8,000. So over a year, you could get your money back on the machine. Over the next year, you started to make good profit, and then you could recycle them. Let's fast forward to today. That 40 kilos is 20, and the machines are 40. It's actually unsustainable. And so many roasters, and Coffee Supreme is shifting this model ourselves. We moved to a lease-to-own model. We've got different financing charges. We certainly offer a free on loan if you want to bundle it in the kilo price. But we're starting to say, look, we will give you amazing coffee, and we'll get you any machine you like, but here's the machine rental and here's a service fee that will support your journey for that equipment. Because even for a cafe owner, the fridge, the burners, the other items in their cafe, no one else funds it. It's just the coffee roaster funding the machine. And I think that makes it really hard for small roasters to compete fairly. So on behalf of everyone, which doesn't affect us as much as others, I don't think it's the right model.
Mm. It is a unique space, that free on loan equipment in Australia in particular, because, one, as Andrew mentioned, the pure volume of coffee going through Australian cafes historically was so much more than many other regions around the world. And so the numbers kind of made sense. It's like, yeah, we'll put a great piece of equipment on there. I also think that in terms of those trends, things have changed with with the knowledge and the expertise that's out there, right? So the average expertise from a cafe operator and even from baristas has risen, whereas historically, again, maybe cafes were leaning on their roasters a lot more to kind of give the advice on good equipment, on maintenance of equipment, on setup and establishment of that. And so really facilitating that in a way and saying, look, this is a big leap. It's different from these cheaper kind of historical, less high quality machines. Being able to lead that conversation and facilitate it was like a major thing for a wholesaler in generating this ecosystem where we've got this incredible coffee culture. But as Andrew said, all of that's changing, and we need to rethink those, because otherwise it's going to bankrupt a few businesses.
Yeah, and speaking of that change, pre-2000s cafes, we've kind of touched on it. Australia and New Zealand, very different. You'd walk down shopping strips and maybe you'd find one or two cafes there. But in those days, it was always like food first, coffee was kind of secondary coming in there. Now today, what did we say before? There's something like over 27,000 cafes and coffee shops across Australia. But the numbers of new outlets appears to be growing and growing faster than the actual demand of these coffee drinkers. In that challenging market space, what would you say to someone wanting to open up a cafe in Australia in 2025?
Well, let's give some reframing of the data, Rowan. So that's absolutely been true that supply has outstripped demand for the last decade. And so we've started to see the average kilos or average cup sold per cafe reduce. You'll notice in the data in the last 12 to 24 months that we're starting to see more cafes close than open for the first time in that discernible history since the turn of the century. So there are cafe closures. And if you look at the hospitality and the default rates on Brad Street, they're claiming that 1 in 11 hospitality company or businesses will go under in the next 12 to 18 months. Now, that's not just cafes, that's also restaurants and other bars. But we are facing pressure. And there's a lot of economic reasons as to why that pressure is occurring. But I think there's a small course correct. So more important than ever, what's involved in being successful in this environment? Well, be willing to work hard. There was a period where people, and it was a great trend actually with a lot of tradies who had made a really great amount of money and gone, geez, I drink a lot of coffee, I should own a cafe. And then they were able to buy one, put a manager in and still make money. And it was fantastic. That day's over. You can't be a passive investor in a cafe now. You need to sweat it. So firstly, be willing to roll up your sleeves and don't confuse your love of coffee for your love of serving it. It's a very different thing when you're behind the machine. Secondly, know your numbers. Obsess over your wage rates, obsess over your rental rates, obsess over your cost of goods and your wastage. Back in my old accounting days, and this is true of cafes, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. And I think we've got that a little wrong. What's been really hard for cafe operators as we've moved from cash to cashless is a lot of these operators who don't have high financial acumen have actually lost whether they're making or losing money. They seem to think at the end of the day the Z read is okay, but they forget there's a delay on their insurance, there's a delay on their super, there's a delay on all these other payment terms, and they get stuck. So have a think about that. Don't overextend yourself. We see a lot of people, we went through that phase in this market where people had $1 million cafe fit outs. That was always crazy to me because that return on capital was nuts. Now, Melbourne was smarter than Sydney because it's always been a cooler environment, so you could step in and just be authentically yourself, and that actually came at a lower price tag, which is why you could sell less and still make more money, because there was no ego, and I really enjoy that about the Melbourne coffee scene. But Sydney got a bit attached to just being who's the flashiest, who can have the best marble, the best ink. Doesn't sell you more coffee, so make that clear. And then possibly the last point is get help negotiating your lease. They're complex. Landlords do this all the time. And so many stories I've heard of people who have trouble getting out of them. The inflation ratchets are high. The other on costs kind of blow them out. And they haven't considered everything when signing that deal up, and that gets hard.
So that's some incredible advice there, I think, for cafe owners. Some a little terrifying and scary, but important, terrifying, scary advice.
Great industry. Get into it. Good for us.
Come on down. Come on down.
We'll cut up that little segment that you just put together, and you can sell it on your website. Anyone else out there?
Coffee. You'd be nuts.
Yeah.
It's just the new FAQ setup from Supreme. So that's talking about cafes, right? And as we've said, there's some challenges and some unique context there, certainly within the Australian market. Well, I'd like us to shift our focus a little bit and talk about like a roastery business, okay? And we have listeners in lots of different parts around the world. So we're not just talking roasting and supplying here in Australia. And you've had some experience in different markets as well. You've been involved in running some of the bigger kind of coffee brands and specialty coffee brands in Australia. We're in an increasingly competitive space, and different roasteries around the world will be increasingly in those competitive spaces. What's some advice that you could give people for how to look at differentiation and how to kind of stand out in amongst a group of people where generally the quality's actually gone up to be on par?
4 or 5 things, and I think it's analogous to all markets. So this isn't just unique to Australia or New Zealand. Again, I come back to my first mandate in life: the people in your business. Hire the best, train them, invest in them, and then let them loose. And so it's sometimes really hard when you're starting a business up to go, "Whoa, that's a really expensive cost. Can I get someone for $5,000 cheaper?" But think about the values they bring, the talent they have, and what they can do for you as a return on their salary. And I think you might make different choices. So just be bold in that space, but also hold them to account. So you have to create that environment. The second is the brand. And I think what Coffee Supreme is famous for is a long-term, consistent investment in brand consistency. And we have avoided following fads and changing over time. And so our brand promise remains constant. Our improvements are not knee-jerk, they're measured and meaningful, and we give a lot of consideration to how we want to show up and how we want to communicate to customers. And that means that when our consumers attach to us, they know the why, and they're not going to be surprised by us bouncing all over the shop. So just have your own brand identity. And I think so many people in the industry, if this is advice, a really strong piece of advice, focus on product, not brand. Everyone in this world, there's 1,000 coffee roasters in Australia. They will all tell you they have the best coffee in the cup. Now, a lot of people do great things. A lot of people, I think, have development areas. That's not the point, but that's just noise. And so you've got to transcend the functional to the emotional. I spent a lot of time in this chat talking about that, but for us, it's about brands. The third thing is for us, marginal gain. Just don't try and do everything overnight. I'm quite obsessed about marginal gains. And so how can we make one small daily improvement, and those 1%ers that add up over time compound to be a better business? And so hire people who constantly want to improve and don't just want to rinse and repeat. Because I think standing still in a competitive market means you're going backwards. Lead, don't follow. And I think that's back to the point. Don't follow trends. Stand for something. Be proud of your positioning, set your price. Don't wait for your competitors to do it and then test the waters. Just understand what is true to you. Respect what other people are doing, but don't be defined by it. And then lastly, which is a comment that we will always stand by, don't scrimp on quality. When markets get tough, you don't cut costs, even if you think no one's watching, because no great business ever cut their way to success.
Amazing. Golden words of wisdom coming from there. Now, you've taken all of that kind of knowledge. I'm sure you're applying that to Coffee Supreme here in New Zealand and then Australia, but now moving all the way to Japan. I mean, I guess the first question is, why Japan? How did this come up?
Well, look, great question. I'd love to say there was a curated strategy in a boardroom where we went Japan and the next frontier. We had some wonderful Japanese employees in New Zealand, Hiroki and Tomoko, husband and wife. They wanted to take the brand to Japan. We thought they were awesome. We thought Japan's awesome. We went, let's give it a crack. So that's how it began. And, you know, back to my point earlier, if you built a business model around an amazing person, it's going to be okay. So that was the choice. There is a real synergistic love between New Zealand and Japan brands. And so there was the instant respect, admiration, and also for Australian brands, but taking that over to Japan, that Southern Hemisphere flat white, that real coffee culture was something that we just got excited by, and the market really embraced us.
But we see a little bit of that. There's such a mutual respect, as you're saying, between Japan and Australia. And I see so much of like our coffee culture has been learned from, taken back and evolved over there. And in the same way, so many of their traditions have kind of come over here. I mean, the boom of matcha and everything that's happening has been wild in the past few years. So there's such a nice give and take with those two areas. Was there something specific that you thought you could, Coffee Supreme could offer Japan? Was there something different you felt you were bringing?
Yeah, well, there was a bit of a history going in there. And so Allpress had done a job going to Japan and started that market. We felt as a business that because our brand really just connected with people beyond the cup, the Japanese market is very attached to those wearable brands. We are quite famous for our merch and our collabs that we do as a brand. Amazingly, we're just off the back this month of doing a collab with Pac-Man. It's their 45th anniversary, and so we've got those little Pac-Man cups eating a Coffee Supreme logo, which I quite like. And we do a lot of those things showing up there. We work with Icebreaker, the clothing company. We've done something with Canterbury. It was just a way for two brands to work well, two branding, two cultures to work well together. So we felt that was right. But outside that, I think there's just a mutual love and respect of Japanese coffee culture. And wanting to just get in it and understand it and learn from it. And I think the Japanese market and our team over there have probably taught the Australian and New Zealand business as much as we have helped them about how to do things authentically and in a measured and consistent way.
You had these two staff who were wanting to take the brand to Japan. The board went, sure, this sounds great. Or someone said, yeah, this sounds great. But what are the next steps? Okay, you're about to take your brand and business and product, which is not just a brand. There's a lot of like things tied up in the creation of it. Certainly with coffee. What was the process or the kind of the steps that you went through in going, how do we take where we are now into that new space?
Yep. So look, this was a true test and learn process. I mean, as founders, there wasn't a huge amount of money to do this. So this was kind of have a go, see what works, earn some money, reinvest it back in the business. It was a long-term mindset, but we went with what we knew. We built a cafe, we built our brand, we built a following, and then we rinse and repeat. And so it started with our core cafe in Shibuya. We've got a little roaster that was originally a shot-based roaster, and so many of the roasters are shot-based roasters. A little 5 kilo roaster up there at the time. We just started roasting and serving in the local community, and now 3 to 4 company stores, 60 to 80 wholesale accounts, and just building slowly. And what's great for us is that we've now really attached ourselves again through our brand partnership, our trust and consistency, and we talk a lot about that in Japanese culture. We have got into offices and corporates with a lot of our drip bags. And so the drinking consumption in Japan is quite different to Australia and New Zealand. So we had to certainly adapt some of our formats for that style.
Well, that kind of leads me into the next question is, what is the biggest difference between Japanese coffee culture and coffee culture in Australia and New Zealand? What was something that really stood out?
Well, firstly, just the amount they do and don't drink and where they do and don't drink it. So let's just give you this broad rundown. I would estimate that 80% of coffee in Japan is drunk at home and not out of home. And so your listeners might have heard this before, but obviously Japan, if you arc your way back 50 years, is a tea drinking country, not a coffee drinking country. It's actually quite small. Coffee came to Japan through Nestle. It was very clever. They wanted to seed coffee-based products, because obviously they've got a big, rich coffee organization. They created a coffee-flavored lolly, and they put that sweet into the Japanese market. The Japanese market found that they enjoyed the flavor of coffee through sweets. That turned them into coffee drinkers. And then it launched probably at home. And so, 80% is consumed at home. Most of it is a dark roast style. Most of it's drunk black and filter and drip bag. And so it's quite different to the Australian consumption where we're 80% milk based. And so that's a complete flip. So let's get ourselves to a cafe. Again, we spoke about even today, our cafes are doing 20, 25 kilos a week. That's probably 200 to 300 cups a day. In Japan, it's 10 to 20 cups a day. So we're talking 7 to 10 kilos a month is the average sales to a wholesale account. And most of these are a machine, one person subleased into another shop. And so labor is very cheap in Japan, and inflation has been non-existent historically. And so the cup prices are quite low, but rent is pretty crazy. So most people set up in a little co-op where they've got, a flower shop and a pottery shop and a little cafe, and they all just have their little business, and they work a single person or two people operation. So there's just not really a wholesaling business. It's very much retailing. There's good margin in running cafes. In Japan, it's hard to build a wholesaling company in Japan. And so for us, we had to think quite differently about our path to market.
It sounds like despite those challenges, you found some good success from the numbers that you're sharing of customers and how the brands kind of started to make an impact there locally. Sounds great, but I'm sure there are a few hiccups along the way. Launching Coffee Supreme into Japan, what were some of the bigger cultural or maybe the business mishaps that you kind of came across? What were some of the lessons that you didn't quite see coming?
I wasn't around with this first chapter of the Japan business.
Not your fault. So is that what you're saying there?
No, I'll own past, present, and future transgressions. But I have picked this up and learned from the team. And I think first is just culture and cultural differences. As much as you understand it, you don't. And so there is a term in Japanese called shinyo, which translates to building trust over time. And just things in Japan take time. People have to establish carefully and cautiously a change in habit. So you can't rush in like an Australian and New Zealander would with bold statements, bold assumptions, bold moves. It will move at its own pace. And so certainly we had to reset a lot of our expectations around growth and how it would come, and reframe what success looked like, because it was very different to the success metrics we would set in the Australian and New Zealand marketplace. So I think that's kind of the point. Outside that, we had a few false starts around the product in terms of we just went with our product and then we had to understand the subtleties and difference in profiling. And so it was at the time, and I don't know if I ever loved this trend as much as others did, that everyone was roasting their espresso blends quite light. And so the Japanese palate doesn't like sour. And so we had to go a lot darker roast to bring out those roast notes, the caramelizations and the sweetness. And for us, just our profiles were off. So working on that was important. Thirdly, in most of Asia, just access to fresh milk and other alternative milks was difficult. And so just getting that right and getting our drink construction right was a piece of work. But, you work through it and ultimately you evolve. And I come back to the point when you're in any market, try to strike the balance between bringing the local culture that you were founded in and proud of and integrating yourself into the culture of the market you're going to, and get that balance right. Don't be all one way or the other, but don't be blind that what's worked for you in one place will naturally work for you in another.
Now, I'll put you in a little bit of hot water here. As a brand with, representation in these 3 different countries, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, who has the best coffee culture?
Oh. Well, I might play the fish on this, but I think we're spoiled for riches, right? To answer your question, it's just like I sidestep the question about who invented the flat white, because that's an arm wrestle in itself. But it's somewhere.
Well, it's obvious, but sure.
No, don't worry. We've got a guy on TikTok recently just broke it down. We're going to talk about it in the coffee news in our little coffee break section following this show. And the results are pretty damning for New Zealand. Let's just say that. We'll sizzle it with that.
Oh.
Yes. Being Australian and running a New Zealand company, I would say really quickly under my breath, the data says Australia came first, but New Zealand was a very close second. Let's just go with that. And it was about 84, 85. But either way, I don't think it matters. We both are responsible for introducing a product vernacular to the world. And so proudly saying, you say flat white, that didn't exist in the whole of Europe. It's now a thing, and that we should all be proud of. As the Japanese coffee culture, a bit because of its history in tea, it's ceremony-based. And so there was just so much about the siphons into the brew experience, into taking your time. It's not the pre-order, run up, grab the coffee, sprint off, go to work. This is a conscious consuming moment. And what I love about that is very much attached to our brand is we focus on conscious consumerism. It's not just fuel to wake me up. It's something that makes me stop, pause, feel and reflect. And I think the Japanese coffee culture does that better than most. Did I answer that by not really getting myself in trouble?
Yeah,
Probably.
you definitely sidestepped that
you
question. But
it.
I was teeing you up for trouble there. We saw it from the start.
We'll try and create the potholes for you. Here's the shovel. Dig in. Okay, so top advice for a coffee brand or a business who's looking to expand into a new market, maybe a new culture. What are some quick takeaways that you'd kind of give them as advice?
Yeah, I think we touched on a few of them in the previous question, but advice, point number one is start with the who. Take someone from your old guard of your existing business and plant them, because they become the foundations of your culture and the connection to the link to the mothership. Then hire well first. So your first hires define the culture of your entire organization. Make sure you hire on values over skill. I think in any new market, you can train most things, but if they're not culturally or values aligned, you're probably not going to get there. Then bring your signature product over that you're proud of, but be open to the 5 or 10% tweak that you need to make to adapt to the local market and land effectively. And that's just showing compassion to style and change. And then just stop rubbernecking. Don't look at what everyone else is doing. Just do your thing and do it consistently. And I think consumers, above all else, just value consistency. So if you stand for something and you do it well every day, you'll be rewarded for it. And then avoid that last point, which is just don't try and do too much. Just do fewer things better, as opposed to try and be everything to everyone.
Great tips. Did you write those down for Golden Brown into
I know,
Portugal?
that's what I was saying.
Right?
I was like, yeah.
Take note.
But have pastel nata sitting on the side, because that goes perfectly with coffee. So your Portuguese business it's ready to go.
I'll introduce my new invention, the Australian tart, with Vegemite and a couple shrimp on the barbie.
No. He said 5 or 10% change. Nothing
okay.
too crazy there.
Sorry.
All right. Now, you're operating in 3 different countries. Australia and New Zealand have a lot of similarities, but Japan's obviously quite different. They've all got slightly different consumer needs. There's different business expenses, costs of living. Obviously, a lot of pressure there, like you mentioned earlier, with the cost of green, foreign exchange, all of that kind of side of things. You've talked a lot about the importance of consistency of the brand and kind of the great product and the experience to consumers, but how would you kind of advise people tackle these things from a business perspective, in terms of operating in different locations?
Oh, good question. This is the boring accountant answer in me. Just have your SOPs sorted. So your standard operating procedures. Make sure you understand what disciplines matter to you and that they can translate to different environments. And so that's roasting parameters, storage parameters, shipping parameters, how you train, how you show up for customers, what QA and QC controls you put in place. Controls are controllable. And the hard part about the coffee industry is we spend a lot of time taking a beautiful handcrafted, hand-grown product and converting it into something that we're very proud of. And then we give it to a barista that we're not there, and then they make it with a lot of variability, more than perhaps we'd like. And it shows up differently in the cup. And so that's unlike a canned drink. It's just is. And so it either works or it doesn't work. And for us, when it's a great coffee, the barista's incredible. When it's a bad coffee, it's the coffee roaster's fault. And so we constantly face that dance of purgatory, but controllable. I know I'm going to repeat this so many times, but also just be humanistic about it. And so sometimes a change or in quality, a change in drink construction is overcome by just being nice to your customer and letting them connect with you, the person, more so than the cup. Because if I'm drinking a nice experience, I'm way more forgiving than if you give me nothing and all I've got to focus on is my score out of what's in the cup. Because I think subtly it's actually way more than that. And I think if you get into the semantics of cup scoring, you go down a rabbit hole that I don't enjoy.
I would also say that even applies now for me in restaurants. Like restaurants are at such a high quality with the food they're producing. Half the time the food just tastes good because I'm being treated well and I'm loving the experience of being there. So it is such a huge point. You were quickly talking about the variables of the coffee in that. Now, more and more people are drinking coffee at home, have great home espresso machines. How do you deal with the challenges of selling specialty coffee through a supermarket?
That was a very big, very scary moment for us, because the fear that you sell to supermarkets is you've sold your soul, quality's crap, it's rubbish, you can't control the variables. The Coffee Supreme, we focused back on our vision, and that is that for Coffee Supreme to sit on every bench for exceptional coffees helping raise the bar. And so that meant kitchen benches as much as cafe benches. So we went, you know what? Consumers deserve the best. We're going to go at this. So how do we do it safely, and how do we do it with education? So we, in New Zealand, we're blessed by having the ability to do a direct store model. So we freight from our roastery direct to every individual store, fresh coffee, pretty much every day, which does give us a bit of a headache when it comes to deliveries, but it's a direct store delivery model. We're one of the very first, and still remain one of the only coffee brands to put the roast on date on the bag as opposed to the best before date. So we stand behind when it was made, and that really mattered to us. We also never changed the product. And so some brands have a different ingredient recipe for the supermarket versus their out of home. We went, we're not going to do that. We're going to show up the same way and stand behind why. And then we just focused on education. Coffee should be bought like bread. It's fresh. It should be consumed fresh and ground fresh. And so the small regular purchase is important for us. We didn't do the kilo bags in supermarkets. In New Zealand, we have a 200 and 500 gram bag. The 500s for our customers that get bigger families who just really love our coffee and just like to load up each week. We love them. And so that's kind of how we went about it. And I don't know if that's the rest is history. But then in wholesale, we also had that conversation with our customers to go, guys, this is here. It is a different proposition. You can respect that at home you want to drink the coffee. We're giving you that choice, and it doesn't change how we're going to show up for you in a cafe as a cafe partner, which put a pretty big spotlight on us, that our team are amazing and they work tirelessly for their wholesale accounts. And we managed 3 or 4 years on to transcend that gap. Now what's interesting, and I see it a bit in the Australian market with Campos and to some extent St. Ali, this is an industry fear more than a consumer fear. And so to the consumer, they're going, Campos, St. Ali, Coffee Supreme, I buy this at home, I enjoy it. I see it at a cafe, I go, wow. So brand awareness transcends from a consumer landscape to wholesale. Whereas, because we're in the coffee game, I notice every cafe's brand without even looking. But I ask, we've done a lot of panel work on this. 1 in 20 people would actually know the brand of the coffee they drink at their local cafe. They just know that Tim makes it for me. And that's nice. And they think they know the brand. It might be the green one or the red one, but that's just how it goes. So I think if you can do it with integrity, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, and I think this is a really, again, it's one of these unique little perspectives for the folks who are listening in from around the world, that hang up that Australia and somewhat New Zealand have about grocery store or supermarket coffee isn't there in the rest of the world. You know, Rowan, you and I have both spent some time in the US, and there, like, grocery stores have huge coffee ranges kind of stocked up. Often it's definitely fresher. Sometimes it's not, but it's still like at a pretty good quality. And you see a lot of the specialty brands kind of on the shelves there. And I think it, as you said, Andrew, it's definitely been a hang up from the industry because we used it as a differentiator early on, saying, no, we're better than that. We're fresh and kind of direct and everything. And now we're having to reel that all back and kind of go, no, we can make this work.
Sure.
So, if we kind of pivot a little bit in our conversation here to tackle the idea of prices, right? Now, prices are going up. We've talked about the cost of things, but we're also flowing through to the cup of coffee and the bags of coffee. This is going to have huge implications for the market in lots of different ways. But what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities or maybe some of the biggest challenges there for people?
Well, this might be counterintuitive, but the significant spike in the coffee price, I think, could be the best thing that's ever happened to the coffee industry. So let's give people a few data points. And it's confusing when we talk in US dollars price per pound, which only weird coffee people do. But the long-term average sits in the low $1 US per pound. Suddenly, it's 2 years ago, it's $2. Then off it goes. In January, it spiked to $3 per pound, and then in February, $4 a pound. And so we saw within the space of 6 to 12 months a 300% increase in our costs. Now, for anyone, even those who've been around a while, that scared the socks off me. And so what do? We have to pause and go, well, what's this telling us? And so again, to your listeners, there's three real elements to the coffee supply chain. There's the farmer, the roaster, and the cafe. Up until 2 years ago, every single year, all three of those people were facing eroding margins, or actually some are losing money. So farmers were pulling coffee plants out and planting pineapples and macadamias. Coffee roasters were doing it for basically minimum wage, and cafes have progressively lost margin over the last 10 to 15 years to go from a business that would earn about 15% down to 1 to 2. And that's just not sustainable. And that's because price was flat for 20 years broadly. Cup price was flat. But you know what? We were boiling ourselves while we're asleep. Wages have gone up, rent's gone up, electricity's gone up, but we weren't passing that on, all our input costs. And so this was a chance through the media, and we take the good and the bad of the media, to say it's time to move the cup price. So we've passed that on. Now, the opportunity is for people who have invested in their brand and who've got wonderful team members that support the customer promise, which is great product, great service. They can pass that price increase on pretty safely. For everyone else who's just shouting, I've got the best coffee, but literally it was vaporware, there's nothing around them. When they throw $5 or $6 a kilo onto a price, like a 20% price increase, cafes are going to go, you know what? It's good, it's not that good. And so maybe now I'll look around for another alternative choice. And what's been really interesting is that people have actually come to us and paid more than they were paying from their previous supplier, because they said, well, I'm going to pay this much more for an extra couple of dollars. I get the guarantee of quality. I get your team, your in-house techs, the best machines, the best trainers. And why wouldn't I want that coffee partner at a really hard time? So we're seeing the market go two ways. People trading up in quality and passing it on confidently, or those trying to hold on. I don't think they're going to make it.
So to put a fine point on it, how much should a cup of coffee cost?
Oh, the $1 million question. So
$1 million?
No, well, if you listen to the media, they'll tell you $12 coffees are on the way. And I think if you chose a double large with a double shot with plant milk made by a ballerina on 1 foot, maybe in 5 years' time, that could be true. But we say the average price in the market for a small coffee is about $4.50. It's been that for too long. It needs to be $5.50 instantly, probably somewhere between $5.50 and $6, depending on the economics of your business. And my view is it probably should be sitting at about a $7 average within the next 12 months, and that's sustainable. Now, I can hear the outrage of people talking about the price of coffee going to $6 or $7. I'm lost on the outrage that isn't there for paying $5 for a bottle of filtered tap water when I go to the airport. So I just don't understand how something hand-grown, hand-picked, hand-shipped, hand-roasted, handmade is worth the same as a bottle of water. But I'm going to forever be confused by that experience. But it actually comes down to cafe operators communicating that value with confidence. At the moment, so many of our cafe partners in the industry are just scared. They're looking over their shoulder, going, I can't put up price, my customers will leave. Well, that's not really the coffee. That's the service and the experience you're offering. So now's the time to reset that completely. So I think it's the best opportunity we've seen for everyone to rebase their expectations with the consumer, which means they can reset their profit at a cafe, which means roasters, cafe operators, and farmers are sustainable for the next decade.
I love it. I love it. So I'm going to keep putting you on the spot here. Does Australia have too many cafes?
That's uncontroversial. The answer is yes. We really need to distinguish the balance. But so a couple of things going on here. Let's qualify that statement. Firstly, there was thousands of lobby-based and office-based cafes. with the work from home, work in office hybrid that's happened now, which obviously was a trend that started in COVID continuing, our consumer patterns and behavior have changed. We are drinking more coffee at home. Therefore, just by pure nature, it's not less coffee, but it's less coffee out of home. So that would suggest demand out of home is dropping. So therefore, there should be a resizing of a number of cafes just on that premise. The second thing is that employers trying to get staff back to work are putting coffee machines and automatic machines in their office to encourage people in, and they're actually not too bad. So that standard has stepped up. And so again, another channel leakage we are seeing. I'm drinking the same coffee. I'm just not walking outside for it. I'm staying inside. So that should be a contractionary factor. And then thirdly, just the basic economics of rents going up for the last 10 years and the wage rates that we have in this country. And I support everyone earning a fair wage. But as you've heard on many podcasts, when you have a public holiday double time, your wage bill in a cafe is 80% of sales. 80. You are underwater. You're only staying open to support loyalty, but that's just not a viable outcome. And so I think many cafes who, again, can't sustain that will also close. And so I think we should see a 10% contraction. And I think that's good for the industry. And it's also good for the operators that stay open.
Yeah. You're also just seeing a lot of people not open on public holidays because of that. They're like, why bother? Just shut it out. Then on the day everyone has off, there's nowhere to go and people who need the work aren't getting it. But bringing that all back, we've had some amazing insights through all of that. What is the most important thing a business can do to understand their customer?
That's got me. So I think, in short, you've got to listen. And so in having sold coffee for many, many years to the industry, we walk into a cafe and we just sell features and benefits. So my coffee's better because we do blah, 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 blah. And it is a bit of noise, but what it's not doing is it's not identifying a problem that the customer currently has. They've got a coffee supplier, they're making coffee. We haven't asked what's working, what's not, how's their business performing, are their customers enjoying that brand? Is there anything we could support you with differently? So I think identifying how you as a supply partner can help really is as simple as the answer becomes. Once you've identified that shared need, see if you're the right brand to solve it. And there are a lot of occasions where you're not. And I regularly walk into an account and going, I'd love this cafe, but I'm not going to pay for it. I'm not going to undercut the current supplier just because. And I think they do a pretty good job. So we work really hard with our teams to say, what can we do to grow their business with our brand and with our team? And if I can't get a yes to that, then we leave them to it. And I think that's how you understand your customer, because you respect them in the first place, that it's their choice to run their business well. And until your needs are aligned, there's a disconnect.
Yeah. And I think this kind of changing landscape with cafes and kind of that high competitive space, we've got you got to know your cafe owners' needs, their problems, but also what's motivating them. You know, people are making these changes in provider because of the things they feel aligned to, like shared values or kind of what the brand represents as well. And again, we kind of keep talking so much about product, or the nuts and bolts, the what, rather than kind of coming back to, am I going to align with kind of what this cafe owner is about and how do I communicate that to them? It's a pretty interesting space. We've kind of covered off on a lot of different things here, Andrew. I'm kind of my mind is buzzing. I'm like, how do we tackle the next thing?
I'm running out of intelligent things to say, so hopefully there's not many questions left.
All right, we'll juice you for all you've got here. I'm going to throw out, we've gone on a big journey here. We kind of started talking about what's, where things started in the 90s now to 2025. We covered some different geographical territory and some changing landscapes. Given kind of all of this picture and things that are happening, what do you kind of see for the future of coffee?
Really great question. So let's talk tech, and let's talk automation, which is equal parts exciting and scary for us as an industry that's built on humans and doing things in an artisan craft. The technology that is coming to automatic machines is already on our doorstep at home. And so the significant advancement in the quality and price point of a domestic machine at home with indoor grinders is meaning I can have a cup at home where the conscious compromise between at-home coffee and out-of-home coffee is shrinking. which is why we're seeing people do it more often. So it's already there. And these inbuilt systems where you can change the texture, the strength, and the temperature of the milk, you can change the extraction times all programmatically is pretty cool. It would be naive for us to think that technology isn't being built out in commercial machines. And so some of the demonstrations I've been to with Eversys and Frankie, some of the two leading players in this space, we've had one of the world barista champions do a blind tasting for us, and he's got an Eversys machine which was made on full automatic, so shot milk, steamed, just poured, so you get the beautiful latte art by the barista, versus one made on a traditional grip handle machine. The panel couldn't tell the difference. So that time is coming. And so what we need to do is understand how that shows up in our future, the balance between a human experience and convenience, which is why things like McCafe drive-through, what's selling on convenience? It's an okay coffee sold consistently quickly. And for many consumers, that matters. And so the best example I've seen globally, if you follow their journey, is Blank Street. I don't know if you watch those guys, but they've gone from one little caravan in Brooklyn to a $460 million, 120-site business built on automatic machines, one staff, and they're tech-led. So your ability to order in advance and do things because the consumer values convenience and consistency. And that's why when we talk about the cafe industry, there's convenience, there's consistency, and in our world, which is why Supreme plays in a different space, there's connection, creativity, and collaboration. We want to be that third space for those that want it. And that's not for everyone, but we're trying to ourselves find that harmony between that automation process and that let's just take a time out. The world can't be in a rush everywhere. This is actually something we can pause. We do have 10 minutes, and this is what we should be spending it on.
Absolutely. And I mean, kind of building out of that, I think today you're someone that has got so much knowledge and, a lot of thoughts on the coffee industry. So I'm going to bring us into a little segment that we have here called Extra Hot Take with 2 Sugars. Not only is it going to be a hot take, but it's going to be a quick take because we're running a bit long. So I think we'll just stick with a hot take from you today, Andrew. Do you have a hot take for us?
Hot take. I would say that if you don't focus as a cafe operator on building an experience for your customers, you would expect to be obsolete within 5 to 7 years because an automatic machine and a technical kiosk will replace you. And that is confronting.
And that's such an interesting hot take because I feel like there's a lot of people that don't want to hear it, but I think it's just so matter of fact that that's what it is. The divide between the convenience that you're talking about before and the experience side of things is going to become bigger and bigger. And it feels like they're going to be the two main key players. And there's not much room in the middle really for anyone to play.
I mean, hopefully it forces this kind of introspection and evolution in what we can do with coffee. That's the other beautiful opportunity there. That's the flip side of the coin, right? It's like, yes, there's this pressure coming. So let's get creative about how do we create more value as an experience for the consumer, not just sitting there about like one flat white or another flat white.
Well, Ben, change is a catalyst for evolution, right? And so we need to go, you can't just rest on your flat white laurels. The market's moving. So not only are consumer trends moving, Gen Z are moving pretty aggressively into frappe flavoured and functional drinks, but the formats of which we drink coffee are changing. And I think this is an exciting opportunity for us as roasters to up our game and to think differently about our consumer connection. I'm excited about what the next chapter looks like. And if you don't see that as an opportunity, then this is going to be a hard couple of years for you as a roaster or as a cafe owner.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. That has been probably one of the most insightful podcasts we've had with so much of your knowledge being shared. Thank you for being so open with all of it and sharing that with the whole coffee community that are listening in to this podcast. If you want to get in contact with us, if you have any questions, if you have any guests that you'd love to see on the show, you can reach out to us at hello@itsjustcoffeepod.com. You can hit us up on the socials, itsjustcoffee.podcast. Just message, I'll also give out the number of Ben here if you want to text him. It's 04183. No, we won't give out that here. See ya.
Cheers.